I never get any less frustrated with the security issues at airports, where you're now sort of practically stripping off to your underwear to get through onto a plane. It seems that most of the security systems are very sort of reactive. They sort of react to something that happened, a threat that happened 5 years ago, rather than worrying about what might be coming. I think we've got to the point now where we're all sort of spending so much time queuing through airports that a travel there loses a lot of its charm. Where would I like to go? I do a lot on South America, but I haven't done all of that, so I haven't been to places like to Venezuela or to a lot of Central America, places like Panama or Nicaragua. So I would very happily go there. Far East is for me at least is a bit of an unknown element to a certain extent. So I haven't been to China or Japan, so those would be high on my list. Australia as well, strangely, that tends to be a place that people go to quite easily, readily, but I must admit I haven't actually been there myself. That'll be one that I put on my list as well. I think the guidebook has its place. Personally, I'm still very fond of the actual paper guidebook. I mean, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist on that score, but it's nice to have a map you can flick back to and a list of sort of suggestions that are right there. Okay, the problem is it goes out of date, and if you have a guidebook from 2007, then there's obviously it's 7 years old, and that comes with its own failings. But I think there's something quite romantic about having a sort of a dog-eared guidebook that you can write notes in, and if you find a bar's closed, you just cross it out, and then you find one that's better than they've listed, so you add that in, and I think there's an old charm to that. But then I think also life through a phone is pretty much where it's at now. So I find it's very hard if you have a phone that works properly. It's very hard to get lost these days. I was in Uruguay last year, driving around. The road network is not especially modern in Uruguay, and then their road signs are not great, and the map I had wasn't good. But as long as you've got GPS on your phone, you're never too far away from looking at where you are. So it has its plus points. I think Canada is a great untapped destination. It's as with America and Australia, it's so vast. It's very hard to get a handle on it in any real period of time. It has a reputation of being slightly dull. I think that's rather unfair. The weather obviously means it's not a destination for winter unless you're skiing. But in summer, you might want to sort of try Vancouver, which is one of the world's great cities. It's a brilliant place. It's a long way. The jet lag will certainly hurt, but it's worth the journey. Then you have places like Toronto and Montreal, which are proper North American cities. They're fascinating places. I spent a week 2 years ago spending a week in the summer in Alberta in the Rockies. The Rockies are just as good in summer as they are in winter. So I drove between Banff and Jasper, which are two of the main ski resorts, but in summer that's a sort of a drive through mountain scenery past glaciers and lakes and waterfalls, and that's a journey that might be considered too. The problem with travel writing is that there are always more aspiring writers than there are jobs available or pieces to be written, which means competition is obviously very high. I think the tip for an aspiring travel writer is the same as for any aspiring writer. It's get the basics right. So make sure your spelling's correct, make sure your facts are correct, do the basics right, and the rest has to follow. There's nothing worse than reading a perspective piece that's badly written or has a spelling mistake in the first paragraph. You have to be on your game to make any distance with this. Obviously the playground has changed a bit since I first started doing this. So online is a great deal more important than it was when I started out. So the value of a sort of personal blog where you're charting your travel adventures or your opinions can make a huge difference. If you can prove that you're a writer with a sort of depth to your writing, and have a body of work online, and that's great assistance. But again, the same rules apply. There are a lot more avenues now than there were 15 years ago. So if you have a presence online, even if your Twitter account is sort of witty and clever, and you have some travel adventures on there, and you post a few good photos and a few good opinions, and then that's obviously also a thing to be considered.